If you want to walk into a clothing store, look at an item, and be able to think to yourself, wow, that's not worth my money, then this video is for you. So the first aspect of quality that you should be looking for is material composition, and making sure that the material composition matches the intended use of the garment. What do I mean by that? Let's say you're in a store looking for a breathable, airy summer shirt, and you see an item that you like, but you look at the content label and it says 80% polyester, 20% cotton. Now, that doesn't seem right to me, because synthetic materials are less breathable and less airy than something like cotton or linen. So why would a company replace cotton with polyester? And in short, it's to save on cost. While something like polyester can mimic cotton, it isn't the same as cotton, but it is cheaper. But material composition is really where you're going to start to see the quality declining, because it's the opportunity for the biggest cost savings for brands. So for the consumer, it's the easiest metric to judge the garment by. So now let's start with the most common material used in clothing. How do you identify good cotton beyond just the care label? Because there's great cotton, there's good cotton, and there's not so great cotton. And you may see a cotton t-shirt being sold at H&M for $5 and think to yourself, why would I pay $50 for a premium t-shirt when I can pay $5 for an H&M t-shirt and it accomplishes the same task? And it's a very valid question, because what really is the difference between a premium shirt and a fast fashion shirt?
Because what really is the difference?
Fundamentally, all natural materials except silk are made up of what's called staple fibers, which range from between 1/4 of an inch to 2 inches in length, with wool being up to 7 inches in length. But cotton generally lies in the 1/4 to 2 inch range. Now bear with me, because while this is a little bit sciencey, it has a direct impact on your experience with the clothing and the quality of the clothing. But at that lower end of the range, between about 1/4 inch to 1 inch, we have what's called short staple fibers. And short staple fibers, when used in garments, they tend to come loose because there are so many ends sticking out, and they start to form little fuzzy balls on the surface of the fabric called pills. And I know you've seen those little fuzzy balls show up, and so that generally means that they're using a lower grade of cotton with short staple fibers. But short staple fibers don't just pill. Short staple cotton feels more rough, it breaks down faster, and it's actually less breathable, so it'll feel more stuffy in warmer weather. On the other end, we have long staple fibers, which range from about 1 to 1.5 inches in length, and this is where we really start to see a noticeable change in quality. Long staple fibers are more durable, they're stronger, last longer, they survive more wash cycles, and they'll save you money in the long run. But they also feel different. They feel silky and smooth. It doesn't feel like a regular t-shirt you're probably used to. But also prints and graphics on long staple cotton shirts will appear more crisp, and the fabric itself will reflect more light, making it seem more luxurious and silky. But that's not all, because color also fades less on long staple cotton. And a really easy way to identify long staple cotton is if the tag or the label says Egyptian cotton, Pima cotton, or Supima cotton. The 3 main types of high quality cotton you'll run into. Now here's a side-by-side comparison so you can see the difference. On this side, you can really see the level of fuzz on the surface of the fabric. It looks blurry and it's not crisp. But with this one, the long staple cotton, you can clearly see the pattern of the knit fabric, and it looks like it's almost in high definition. So the next time you're shopping in store, try to determine if a cotton is long staple cotton or short staple cotton. But along with fiber, I think it's important to address a very popular topic in fashion right now. The GSM, or grams per square meter, which is the general weight of the garment. I feel like GSM has become a sort of buzzword in fashion, where there's this notion that a high GSM means that the garment is inherently higher quality, while that's not necessarily true. Because while a heavyweight tee or sweater may feel premium from the weight alone, you may not want a really thick shirt or sweater. And as we just learned, quality is largely determined by the fiber. So just because a tee is a lightweight doesn't mean that it's a low quality. A heavyweight fabric, something with high GSM, can still be made with short staple fibers and be lower quality. Weight in GSM really comes down to personal preference of how you want it to fit and drape on your body. A good rule of thumb, though, for determining quality and the thickness of a garment is to put your hand behind it. If you can see your hand and the color of your hand through the garment, it's probably too thin, and it probably won't hold up over time. But if you can't see it, then you're probably fine. Now let's talk about the other main fabric you're probably going to be looking for. Wool is often replaced by a synthetic fabric called acrylic, and acrylic imitates one quality of wool, the warmth, but it has none of the other qualities: the breathability, the moisture wicking, the odor resistance, the ability to keep you cool in warmer weather and warm in cooler weather. And those qualities of wool are once again inherent to the fiber, because wool is a natural fiber with very unique qualities, such as crimp, the waviness of the fiber. Think curly hair, and when the wool is then spun into a yarn, then a fabric, all those curls, that crimp, turns into little pockets of air, which provide insulation for the fabric, giving it the ability to keep you warm. Wool also has the ability to conduct heat away from your body. So when it's hot outside, wool will help to keep you cool. But also, like I mentioned, it's odor resistant. The crimp, those curls, store your body odor as much as they store warm air. So it's basically keeping your stink in there like buried treasure, only to be released when it's cleaned. So wool is a great material, but it's often replaced by acrylic, which will keep you warm, but it will also keep you sweaty and smelly. You can't really wear it in cooler weather, and it's just all around not a great fabric. But different types of wool have different qualities, so which ones should you be looking for? Well, when I shop for wool, there are 3 main types that I keep my eye out for. When I want to be confident I'm buying a comfortable wool that won't be itchy and will last a long time. The first being virgin wool, which comes from little lambs. Virgin wool is very soft and is called virgin because it's the first shearing of the sheep. That lamb had never been shorn before. This is the first hair that it ever grew, and you stole it from them. Then there's merino wool, which is wool from a merino sheep, which also offers a very soft and very fine wool, much like virgin wool, and makes a great, comfortable product. And if you generally think of wool as itchy, I encourage you to go try merino wool, because that can solve the problem for a lot of people. And I personally wear merino wool year-round. I have this Mersby Schwanen merino wool tee, which I love wearing in hot weather because it helps prevent me from overheating and being really sweaty in the East Coast heat. And yes, I got this after watching The Bear. I bought a few different ones. I had to try them out. But then the third type of wool I look for, and you should too, is cashmere, which comes from the undercoat of the cashmere goat, which is a goat native to Mongolia. It's a very fine fiber, just like merino and virgin wool, so it too feels incredibly soft and incredibly comfortable, and generally is not itchy. But due to the massive over-farming of cashmere goats in the past couple decades, leading to less fertile soil, less nutritious grass for the goats to graze on, the general quality of cashmere has declined. So if you buy cashmere, I think it's best to look for vintage first. But a couple of good wool brands that I know of are Sheep Inc., who offer a lifetime warranty, and their products are actually carbon negative, as well as a new brand I just heard of called Notum, a company whose owners work directly with Mongolian farmers to get high quality cashmere, giving them more power over their natural resources and giving them more money for their product by cutting out the middleman. So go check them out. I'm not affiliated with them at all, but I respect what they're doing. There are many other types of wool, but virgin, merino, and cashmere are the ones I look for when I'm looking for high quality, comfortable wool garments. Now let's talk about craftsmanship and the build quality of garments. Because how a garment is constructed, the attention to detail in the stitches, seams, and finishings will not only make a garment look better visually, but will also directly impact its lifespan, allowing you to go longer periods where you don't actually need to buy new clothes, if you don't want to. I've always gone by the ethos of buy nice or buy twice. And following that ethos does come with a level of privilege to be able to buy nice the first time, but it is really applicable with clothing. Because if you don't buy nice the first time, you'll probably have to buy a lot more than twice, and waste a lot more money in the long run. So the first thing with quality, and something you've probably heard before, but when you're buying a garment with an all-over print or pattern, make sure they match up at the seams. So there isn't a visual break where one part of the pattern jumps to a different part, like this. High quality garments and accessories will always try to have the patterns meet up at the seams as best as possible. And while patterns matching at the seam doesn't necessarily impact the build quality, it may be an indication of more attention to detail elsewhere in the garment, because a brand caring about the patterns matching up perfectly at the seams is more likely to pay attention to the build quality as well, in my experience. The next thing you want to look for when identifying a high quality garment is to look inside, because inside is where many brands will skimp out on since it's hardly ever seen. First thing on the inside, you're going to want to see how the seams are finished. Now, 80 to 90% of the garments you have, and probably you'll see in stores, will have something called an overedge or overlock stitch. And it's a single process where the panels of the garment are joined together and the seams are finished in one swoop. It's the most widely used process in all of fashion. It's not exactly high quality, but there are different levels of quality to it. In low quality garments, the thread and the tension may be loose and inconsistent. It'll look uneven and it won't hold up very well over time. And make sure to check key points of intersection on the garment, like where one panel comes together with the other at the hem, as well as inside the armpit. These are both points where 2 or more overlock stitches converge on each other, and it's a key point where a lot of quality goes downhill. While a higher quality garment with much better stitch tension and more quality control will look much cleaner and tidier with a smaller distance between the stitches, and it'll last longer. And while an overlock stitch is the most common one you'll see, it's important to know a good one from a bad one. There are other great quality seam finishes and stitchings that you need to know. One method being the flat-filled seam, where both raw edges of the fabric are contained inside the folds of the seam. And a flat felled is very common on the inseam or outseam of denim mostly. And this is a great seam finishing because since the raw edges aren't exposed to the elements, it'll practically never come undone and it's a very durable stitch. However, don't be tricked because many brands will opt for what's called a faux flat felled seam, which looks like a flat felled seam but isn't as strong. On the outside, you can see the 2 lines of stitching, but when you turn it on the inside, you can see that it's just a raw edge finished with that cover stitch. And this is used by a lot of companies to just save money on construction methods, while giving you a lesser quality product. But flat felds aren't actually just limited to jeans. You'll see them on dress shirts, some basics, and other more high quality pieces. So look out for them because they are a definite sign of a high quality garment. But another common way of finishing a seam in a raw edge is with something called a bound seam, where a separate piece of fabric called bias tape is wrapped around the edges of the main body fabric and stitched in place. And this hides and protects the edges of the fabric, preventing them from fraying and unraveling. This technique is mostly used in unlined blazers and other unlined outerwear, but bound seams and flat-filled seams are the most common ones that you'll see that will give you indicators that that's a high-quality garment. Something I talked about in my last video on the declining standards of quality in clothing was the concept of the deep hem, where a significant amount of extra fabric is folded up into the hem to allow for alterations. And today, most consumer-level clothing has teeny tiny little hems that you can't alter at all unless you want to make them shorter. But as a consequence, the customers, you and me, we can't alter the length of the garment if it's too short, or if we grow. But it's strategic, because if you eliminate the deep hem, if you eliminate extra fabric allowing you to alter your clothing, then people will be forced to buy more clothing. Now today, you probably won't find deep hems on any basic garments beyond formal clothing. Dress pants, skirts, dresses, tailored pieces like that. So when you buy more formal pieces like that, make sure you look for that deep hem so you can alter it for yourself or the next owner can alter it for them. Now here's an example of a garment with a deep hem. This is a pair of shorts from Balenciaga my wife thrifted. If we look at the hem, we can see a few things. First, you can see that there's no stitch line on the outside of the garment. It's perfectly clean at the hem, when most hems of most pants have a line or two of stitching. This is called a blind hem, something that used to be very standard in garments, but is now an indicator of high quality. Now look at the edge of the fabric on the inside, and you can see what's called the overedge stitch. It's small, tightly woven, and incredibly neat, and it almost looks like a beautiful border around the fabric. And the last thing you can easily look for is the seam allowance, the extra fabric on each seam extending beyond the stitch line. Lesser quality garments will typically have little to no seam allowance at all, and as a result, they're much more likely to fray and come undone at the seams and just not last very long. They're pretty much made to end up in a landfill. So ideally, you want to look for garments with at least a 1/4 inch of seam allowance. Now let me show you the difference between two items from opposite ends of the spectrum. These are $1,000 dress pants from Alexander McQueen, and these are $20 dress pants from H&M. You can see here on the inside of the McQueen pants that the overedge stitch is nice and neat, it's evenly spaced, and there's about 3/8 of an inch of seam allowance on the in and out seams. And there's also a couple inches of fabric on the hem for alterations. And when we look at the H&M pants, there's no seam allowance, and the panels aren't stitched together and then finished, they just have the overlock stitch to join the panels and sew it in that one motion. But you can see that it has about a 1/4 of an inch all bound up with thread, so it's practically unusable if you need to repair or alter it. Here's the H&M pants. They look like a mess. There's loose threads everywhere. All these seams and threads here are exposed to the daily abrasion of your body and the washing machine and everything else. They'll wear down quickly, but hey, they're only $20, so what can you really expect? Now look at the inside of the Alexander McQueen pants. You can immediately see the difference. The inside on these has white facing that hides most of the seams, protecting them from damage while also giving the pants a more structured and weighty feel to them. The inside of these pants are just as beautiful as the outside, making for a very high quality garment. Now there's about $1,000 price difference between these items, but there are still ways that I would improve the McQueen pants. So I'm not telling you that you need to go out and spend $1,000 on some Alexander McQueen pants. I'm just using these to demonstrate opposite levels of quality in construction, because you can find this level of quality at lower price points. You just have to know what to look for. I hope this video was valuable to you, and if it was and you too are looking for something more in your wardrobe, then please like and subscribe so I can continue to create this content for free, and maybe consider joining the Patreon. And let me know if you want a part 2, because there's definitely so much more in terms of quality that I can talk on, but I just wanted to keep this video at a semi-reasonable length. I hope you enjoyed it, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.